We're Aria.
And Michelle, and we're the Board Game Tutors.
Today, we're going to be doing advanced concepts for the board game Summoner Wars, specifically for the reinforcement deck entitled Grungor's Charge, that has reinforcements for the Guild Dwarves, the Cave Goblins, and for a few Mercenaries as well. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right.
So, as the name, a reinforcement pack implies, basically, all of these units, they don't come in the regular Guild Dwarf, Cave Goblin, or Mercenary factions. If you ever wanted to put any of these cards from Grungor's Charge into your Guild Dwarf deck, into your Cave Goblin deck, or in any other deck for the Mercenaries, obviously, because Mercenaries can go into any other deck, it's basically a one-to-one trade. These are just the basic rules. If you have a champion in your regular Guild Dwarf deck, or any deck for that matter, you exchange them for one other champion. So one Guild Dwarf champion for another Guild Dwarf champion, one Guild Dwarf common for another Guild Dwarf common. Same for the Cave Goblins, and Mercenaries can go into any other deck as well. So yeah, they're Mercenaries. They sell their services to anyone. So let's go ahead and get started on this deck and all the cards that are in it.
Okay, so this is Grungor, the one who the deck is named after, Grungor's Charge. So he has a summon cost of 6, an attack value of 4, is a melee fighter, and has 5 hit points. And his special ability is called Charge. When moving Grungor during your movement phase, you may move him up to 2 additional spaces. Grungor cannot attack on a turn that he used Charge. So this special ability is pretty straightforward. He's able to move extra. So normally you can move 3 spaces, but in his case he can... 2 spaces. Normally you can do 2 spaces, but in his case he can do an additional 2 spaces, so he can go 4 spaces. Yeah. We do find this a little funny in terms of, it's not very thematic, because when he does Charge, he can't attack on that turn. So if he does those extra 2 movements or 1 extra space, either way, he can't attack on that turn. So you just have to keep that in mind.
So yeah, if he does 2 movements, he's not hampered in his attack at all. But if he goes up to 3, or if he even goes up to 4, basically that qualifies as Charge. So that means he cannot attack. So not very thematic. How can he come out of nowhere and help people if he basically ran out of breath to attack people with?
Yeah.
Thematically, it would sound like they taught him how to charge, but they didn't teach him how to fight after charging. So they didn't teach him proper breathing skills.
So you probably want to keep in mind, if you're going to use Charge and not have him able to attack on that turn, you might want to keep some commons around him so that he's not too vulnerable to getting destroyed before he has a chance to actually attack.
Yeah, so for example, you might have a common here, here, and here, just to, obviously not on this half of the board, because he didn't charge anywhere if he stayed on this half of the board.
Right.
But basically, if he's on the opposite side of the board and he charged into the fray, you want to try to block him off with your commons as much as possible, or your other units.
Right.
So conjurations, champions, whatever. But basically block him off, so that way on the next turn he can move 2 spaces and then just start hacking away at the enemy.
Right.
So that's that. Okay,
so that's Grungor. Then we have another champion. His name is Tordoc. He has a summon cost of 5, an attack value of 2, is a ranged fighter, and has 4 hit points. His special ability is called Rune of Protection. When an opponent rolls to attack a common unit you control that is adjacent to Tordoc, that unit only receives wound markers from die results of 5 or higher during that attack. So basically he's able to support common units that are near him. This doesn't apply to him. It doesn't take a die result of 5 or higher to hurt him. He has the typical 3 or higher weakness. But he boosts the commons that are around him.
Yeah, so obviously you need to place him very protectively. He has 2 range, so obviously that's not weak. That's a pretty good attack overall. But one thing you have to plan for is basically surrounding him with commons. So that way all the commons around him are harder to kill.
Right.
And he is harder to kill because he doesn't have that many openings to attack him directly.
Right.
So obviously you just have to plan for that. And in a minute or two I'll show you one interesting combination that you can use with Tordoc.
All right.
Okay, so that is that.
Then we have one more Guild Dwarf champion to talk about. His name is Halvor. He has a summon cost of 5, an attack value of 1.
Sorry about that.
Is a melee fighter and has 8 hit points. So he has a lot of health, as you can see. His special ability is called Rage. Before attacking with Halvor, you may add up to 2 wound markers to this card. So you can see there why he has so many wounds available. Add 1 to Halvor's attack value until the end of the turn for each wound marker added in this way. So as you can see, to start with, his attack value is just 1. That's not very high. He can make it higher, but in order to do so, he has to wound himself. So there, if you were to add 1 wound just like that, then he would have an attack value of 2 for that turn. And then the maximum you can do is to add 2 wounds, and then his attack value would be 3 for that turn. So it's an interesting mechanic here that he does have to hurt himself, and then he has like extra life in order to take it, but that will disappear pretty fast if you do this several times. So something to keep in mind.
Obviously, your enemy will try to attack him because he is kind of a tank.
Right.
And if you're hurting him, obviously, your enemy's going to go after him even more because he's going to be that much weaker.
Right.
So he's not an awesome champion. Basically, you use him in a pinch when you really need the help. And yeah, if you have to, you can wound him to get more attacks. But
right.
The one thing that's unfortunate about Rage is it's only a temporary Rage because it lasts for that turn only.
Right, you'd have to keep adding more wounds on each turn if you wanted to keep adding to his attack value.
So it doesn't matter if on the turn previous you used up 2 wounds to give him 3 attack, he's back down to 1 on the following turn.
Right. Okay, so then we have a common unit here, a common unit for the Guild Dwarves. This Guardsman has a summon cost of 2, an attack value of 1, is a melee fighter, and has 3 hit points. So he's a bit harder to kill than some of the original Guild Dwarf commons, so that's really nice. His special ability is called Tough. When an opponent rolls to attack this Guardsman only receives wound markers from die results of 4 or higher during that attack. So basically, he's always a bit harder to wound than normal units usually are, because if you get a 3, that's not good enough to hurt him. You need to get a 4 or higher. Your opponent does.
And yeah, obviously, it's thematic. He's tougher, but a little bit more difficult to summon for 2 magic.
Right.
And he has 3 health, which is higher than the other commons.
Right, and he's tough, so it's harder to damage that health.
Okay. And the last Guild Dwarf.
This is a Ballista, common of the Guild Dwarves. It has a summon cost of 2, an attack value of 1, is ranged, and has 3 hit points like the Guardsman. So the Ballista's ability is called Siege Engine. This Ballista cannot attack if it was moved on this turn. When attacking with this Ballista, you may attack from up to 5 clear straight line spaces away. When attacking a wall card with this Ballista, add 2 to this Ballista's attack value during that attack. So we have a couple different things going on here. You can move it because obviously it has wheels, it can move, but when you move it, you can't attack on that same turn with it. I'm guessing it's like it kind of took the whole turn to move it or something like that.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you move 1 space or 2 spaces. That immediately invalidates this Ballista from attacking.
Yeah. Maybe it was just too heavy to move and still have time to attack. And then it can attack from up to 5 clear straight line spaces away. So that's a longer range than ranged units usually have. So that's important.
So right here, if you look, it could go all the way 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up in North Merrick. Can shoot all the way as far as North Merrick.
Yep, so it can definitely shoot far, but just keep in mind, you can't move it into position and shoot on the same turn. So in our experience, this makes it difficult because the enemy will just move out of the way once you position your Ballista.
And it's only an attack value of 1, so you can only roll 1 die. So yeah, it's rather difficult to manage that.
Right.
However, there is one way of mitigating that. If you have a wall, obviously you will have a wall at the beginning of the game, but if you can summon your Ballista immediately next to the wall, so here, 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 or here, that doesn't count as movement because obviously it came on the board this turn. And now, if there is a target within range, you can attack with a Ballista. But if there is not a target within range, you have to move the Ballista and thereby invalidate the attack for that turn.
Right. So something that helps a little bit is you can see that this really is meant to attack walls with, because it says when you attack a wall card, you add 2 to the attack value, so then you use 3 dice. And of course, walls don't move, so it's a little bit easier to get the ballista in position and then the next turn be able to attack the wall that you're trying to attack. But it can get blocked, and then if your opponent blocks the wall, then you still have a problem, of course.
And ironically, it's a ballista, but I guess it's a short, well, not short range. It basically can't shoot over other units either.
Yeah.
So obviously that's another handicap as well. Even if your units are in the way, it can't shoot someone 5 spaces away.
Right. Has to be clear, like always.
So obviously, like I said in that previous example, it can shoot as far as North Myrick. So if there was a wall, obviously that's a Guild Dwarf wall, but if it was an enemy wall there, then this ballista would not shoot 1, it would shoot 3. And yeah, so obviously that would be a good placement of the ballista right when it starts out, because it could shoot that wall that far away, and every turn you can use 3 dice and hack away at your opponent's wall. Obviously, it's all up to luck. You don't know if you're going to hit or not, but that is one possibility. So one other interesting possibility with a ballista would be if you could get into this configuration, such as this. Basically, if you had a ballista here, and a ballista here, and a wall here, that would give Tordoc complete coverage, because it's not very likely your opponent is going to get all the way behind Tordoc before he could get into position to attack them. And this ballista would then only be hit by 5s and 6s, obviously. And Tordoc, so Tordoc would be boosting them. And if you could happen to have such that your opponent's walls were also in front of the ballista, that would also be a terrible combination for your opponent to deal with. However, it is awfully hard to get this combination into place. And obviously, the wall doesn't have to be exactly here. Obviously, your units being in the way also matters. But yeah, so that is one possibility to keep Tordoc safe, and to also keep the ballista in a useful position, because obviously you're going to keep hacking away at the enemy wall until it's dead. So those were all the Guild Dwarf commons and champions. There's 5 ballista, 5 guardsmen, and 1 copy of each of the champions. And that's going to be the same for this whole deck.
Yep. So now we have a champion of the Mercenaries. Her name is Malevolence. She has a summon cost of 7, an attack value of 4, is a melee fighter, and has 7 hit points. And her special ability is called Cursed Blade. It's rather simple. After attacking with Malevolence, add 1 wound marker to this card. So apparently her blade is cursed and somehow wounds her whenever she attacks. So something to keep in mind. She's going to keep hurting herself. But she does have 7 life, so obviously that tries to kind of compensate for her Cursed Blade. And she is expensive, costing 7 magic, but she does roll 4 dice, which of course is a very powerful attack.
Just like Grungor, actually. Slightly more expensive, but more health.
Right.
And also, I'm not sure why she has green skulls. Maybe that's why she has the 4 attack. Like,
yeah, she hits people with them.
Her stuff that she carries on her shoulder curses you. I don't know. I'm not sure. Also, I like to make fun of the fact that she has a cow skull on her cursed blade. Like, that's what makes the blade cursed, or is it the skulls? I don't really know. But it seems like it covers up the majority of the blade, so that just seems not very thematic. But yeah, that's Malevolence for you. And you can include her in any faction, because like we said, mercenaries sell their services to anyone. But since she is a champion, you would have to exchange her for one of your specific army's champions, not commons champions. Okay.
Then we have Vermin. This is the common unit of the mercenaries that comes in this reinforcement deck. It has a summon cost of 1, an attack value of 1, is a melee fighter, and has 1 hit point. So it's easy to remember, 1, 1, 1. Their special ability is called Plague. After moving this vermin, you must roll a die once for each unit that is adjacent to this vermin. On a result of 5 or higher, that unit receives 1 wound marker. So basically it's a danger to be next to these guys because they have the plague, apparently. As you can see, they look like rats.
They look awfully healthy to me, though.
Yeah.
That's just my personal opinion.
I guess they're just carriers of the plague or something.
Maybe the knives are plague-ridden. I don't know.
So basically they're a danger to any unit that's adjacent to them. So obviously this could help you if you're enemy units are adjacent to it because it might wound them, but it also might wound your own units that are adjacent to it.
So obviously you don't want to be next to your own vermin because they can hurt you as well.
Mhm.
Obviously, the only inflict plague wounds, I guess, with 5s or 6s. So obviously the incidence of that is obviously less than half of the time. So obviously you just want to take that into account. But yeah, you might just grab the vermin, summon them onto your opponent's side of the field, and then just try to hurt them with the plague, as well as trying to hurt them once with their knives.
Right. And of course, these guys won't last very long because they have just 1 health.
But yeah, so that's the vermin.
All right. Now we're on to the cave goblin units that come in this deck. This guy is named Scag. He's a champion. He has a summon cost of 4, an attack value of 1, is a ranged fighter, and has 6 hit points. His special ability is called Curse. At the beginning of your turn, you may choose 1 unit that is adjacent to Scag. Add 1 wound marker to the chosen unit. So this is kind of precise in terms of you don't roll a die. You just automatically add a wound marker to any unit that is adjacent to him, any single unit.
And this is a may clause, so obviously you don't have to do Curse if you don't want to. Obviously, if you have one of your friendly units next to Scag, you don't necessarily want to curse them unless you have a specific purpose for that magic. But also, we like to make fun of the fact that he has a little voodoo doll with a knife in his hand, but he can only curse people if he's right next to them. And also, something else that's really important about his curse ability is the fact that this is at the beginning of your turn. This is before anything else happens, completely everything else. So this is before summoning. Basically, this is at the beginning of your turn.
Yeah, so you don't get to move to put him where you want him to be. You just have to go off of who's adjacent to him right when he starts.
So at the end of your most recent turn, you have to put Scag into a vulnerable position to use the curse ability.
Right. So that's important.
So, and obviously, he only rolls 1 die at ranged. So, obviously, that's another thing to take into account. Like, you might specifically move him next to an enemy common unit, but if there's another enemy common unit within range, he might roll his die against that second enemy common unit. So that way, hopefully, you'll still be next to another enemy common unit at the beginning of your next turn.
Right.
And obviously, people will go after him because he's annoying.
Yeah. So if someone like that vermin unit was next to him, if he gives them 1 wound, that's going to destroy them and put them into your magic pile. So that's kind of powerful.
So that's that. Scag.
Okay.
Oops, 1 second.
Then we have Crag. I don't know if they're cousins or something, but their names rhyme anyway. He has a summon cost of 4, an attack value of 2, is a melee fighter, and has 5 hit points. And this guy is also a champion of the cave goblins. His special ability is called Tireless. Crag does not move during your movement phase. Instead, immediately after your normal movement phase, you may move Crag up to 3 spaces. So you always have the opportunity to move him because basically his movement doesn't count toward your normal movement. Yeah, normally you can move 3 units, but he always has the chance to move after that. So yeah, you can always move him. Just keep in mind he's moving after everyone else, so you'll have to have gotten them into positions that allow him to move. You won't be able to get him out of the way before you move others, etc.
He's similar to the lionesses in the jungle elf faction because they have to move after everyone else moves. So, he doesn't look like a lioness to me, but he has their ability, and he can move up to 3 spaces himself, only himself.
Right, so he gets 1 extra space to move into.
Okay, that was correct.
Okay, then finally we have Reeker.
I don't know if it's because he stinks or what.
He wreaks havoc. So he's a champion of the cave goblins. He has a summon cost of 4, an attack value of 2, is a melee fighter, and has 5 hit points. His special ability is called Relentless. Reeker does not attack during your attack phase. Instead, immediately after your normal attack phase, you may attack with Reeker. So you probably remember the fighters in the original Cave Goblins deck. They do basically an extra attack. Not that they get to attack twice, but their attack doesn't count toward the total number of attacks that you get to do, and it comes after the other attacks. So he's kind of like a champion version of a fighter.
Right. So with Reeker and fighters in your army, on a given turn, if you have 3 other units your summoner, your other commons, etc. You can do 3 normal attacks with those units. Then you could do 1 attack with Reeker. You may, obviously, it's your choice, because in any given situation, he might not have a target to attack, that sort of thing. And if you have 2 fighters, you have a limit of 2 attacks with 2 fighters total. 1 fighter and 1 fighter. So then that's a maximum of 6 attacks all at once. So basically, with Reeker and fighters, you can potentially add 3 more attacks onto your original 3 attacks.
Right. And it sounds like with Reeker and the fighters that you can do their attacks in any order, because it just says after your attack phase for him, and same with the fighters, it just says after your attack phase. So there's not a specified order that Reeker and the fighters have to take their turns in.
Okay. So that was all the Cave Goblin champions. Now the commons.
Okay, first we have a Beast Rider. He has a summon cost of 1, an attack value of 1, is a melee fighter, and has 1 hit point. And his special ability is called Rider. During your movement phase, instead of moving this Beast Rider normally, you may move it up to 7 clear straight line spaces. So that means he can actually go all the way across the board if you choose to do that.
Almost all the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, 7. Yeah, that's right. All the way across.
Similar to the Lioneers from the Jungle Elves, if you're familiar with those. So basically, because he's riding this creature, he can go farther, obviously.
And the creature is rather weird looking with a Cthulhu tentacle stuff on its face. And also, I like to make fun of the fact that he looks like he's wearing like a decorated paper bag on his face. Like, he's not like the other cave goblins who bask in their ugliness. He wants to cover up his face.
Well, his beast looks creepy enough on its own.
Yeah.
So for these movements, just remember you're gonna either choose to do normal movement of 2 spaces, which lets you go not in a straight line, like you go forward and to the right or something like that.
You can go in a straight line, 2 spaces, but yeah.
Right. But so if you do your normal movement, then you don't have to go in a straight line. If you choose to do 7 spaces, then all those 7 have to be in a straight line.
And obviously it can be up to 7. So obviously if there's a person in the way, you can't trample that person because this isn't called trample.
Right.
If there's a wall in the way, you can't run over the wall, etc. So yeah, basically that's that. Basically limited by what's in the way.
Yeah, so if you want to do more than 2, you have to go in a straight line, basically.
All right. And the last one.
This is a Climber. He's a common of the Cave Goblins, has a summon cost of 1, an attack value of 1, is a ranged fighter, and has 1 hit point. His special ability is very obnoxious if you're his opponent. It's called Scale Wall. When an opponent rolls to attack this Climber, if this Climber is adjacent to a wall, it only receives wound markers from die results of 4 or higher during that attack. And then the really obnoxious part, this Climber may move through walls, but must end its move on an unoccupied space. So this is a rare unit. As you can see from his name, he's called a Climber. It's a rare unit in terms of it's actually able to climb over walls. So there are very few units in Summoner Wars that can go over walls, even if they can go over other things or
people.
Yeah, if they can go under things, etc. It's very uncommon for them to be able to go over a wall. So yeah, your opponent's going to have to keep that in mind when they're thinking about whether their summoner is safe, for example. But he does have to end on an unoccupied space.
Yeah, so he can't just hang out on top of the wall. That is an illegal move.
Right. And so the first part of his special ability, he's basically safer when he's beside a wall.
So that's friendly and also enemy walls.
Yeah. So if he's next to a wall, your opponent has to roll 4 or higher in order to damage him.
So he's similar to a guardsman in that respect that we just talked about earlier, who are tough all the time. He's just tough next to a wall, basically, because he used his grappling hook and jumped on the wall, so it's slightly harder to hit him, I guess.
Yeah, or he's more confident next to a wall.
It's a scale wall, so yeah. I'm guessing he partly climbed the wall, but he didn't have enough warning to be invincible, so... Yeah, basically he started to climb the wall, so you have less of a target to hit. And then the second part of it, he can't end up on an unoccupied space even if he climbs the wall. So in this example, basically in this example here, this Climber only has 2 movement, so it couldn't go 1, 2, 3, for example, because that's not a valid movement. But if he was here, usually the scale wall, the second half of it, only works if they are immediately next to a wall. So first you'll have to take the climber, and basically you'll take the climber, move him next to the wall for one movement. Then once he's next to the wall on the next turn, when he moves, he can go 1, 2, or 1, 2, or 1, 2.
So he's limited in that regard.
Yeah. And for example, if there were 2 walls here, you couldn't go 1, 2, because then you would end up on a wall again. You'd have to go 1, 2.
So your opponent may try to surround walls, obviously, in order to prevent the climber from using his ability.
Right. So obviously that is that. And yeah, that was the last card in Grungor's charge.
Okay, so we hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know if you have any comments or questions or clarifications. And if you enjoyed the content of this video and would like to get more regular updates from us, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Board Game Tutors. You can also find us on BoardGameGeek.com. Our username is The Board Game Tutors, one word.
And you'll see all of our content there as well. We'd appreciate it if you guys gave us likes, left us comments, that sort of thing. Also, one last fact. This wall does not come in Grungor's charge. I just had this on the table just so you could see what the walls would look like when interacting with these cards.
Right. Good point.
So that was that.
All right, we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.